All right, a subject that a lot of people talk about, and it's it's a lot of it doesn't really hold a lot of weight in terms of real world applications, and this is the whole axe versus knife, or knife versus axe, or hatchet versus Bowie knife, or all this other stuff, and I find it quite comical because. No one says, vice grips versus screwdriver or shovel versus pickaxe, right? They are completely different tools. And anybody who has used any of these tools knows that they are, in fact, completely different tools. It was once said that an axe can build a home and everything in it. And this is true. Axes have been around for a long time, so have knives. And when you look at the first thing that a frontiersman would have grabbed, or someone from colonial times, even all the way up until the 1950s in the United States and Canada, at the very least, many people were still using axes. And axes can come in the form of, your hatchet, your pocket axe, your, cruiser axes, double bit felling axes, and mauls, right? Things to split wood. And there's a reason why when a person is trying to heat a cabin with a wood stove, they don't have a BK9 to split their wood, right? Where are all these people out there living the life, wilderness living, actually living it, not going out for a weekend and splitting down some, 5-inch rounds and saying, hey, look, this will do everything an axe will do. Because it won't. And an axe basically won't really do everything that a knife can do. Given the choice in the northern bush, pretty much anybody worth their salt is going to have an axe. There is no other tool that will feed the night's fire like an axe, that will pound, that will chop through ice, so on and so forth. So, we often have these situations where people talk about, all right, splitting, right? And there's some YouTube talents that exist out there that say, hey, if you've got a few feet of snow underneath you, there's no way you're going to be able to split wood. Well, obviously we know that trappers and the like in the northern forests had snow underneath them, and I'm sure that they split wood. You don't need the traditional blocks, base stumps, if you will, to split wood. There's a myriad of other ways to split wood. The one thing that you must realize is that splitting wood generally is not necessary. It's fun to do, don't get me wrong. It's almost therapeutic. And you should do it. So you learn proper grain orientation, and you just learn the skill of doing it. But in general, you're not going to need to split a night's worth of firewood. Perhaps you might need to split some kindling to get your fire started. Once your fire is established, you should be able to throw rounds this big on, and it should readily catch. You do not need to split down 8-inch pieces throughout the entire night. A lot of that is foolhardy, and it's a sign of a novice. Once again, do it, practice it, and see how it is. But in general, this isn't necessary. So when it comes to splitting, we have mauls, right? And of course, that's going to be our number one. And then we do have, hatchets, axes, okay? And all of these things people talk about You know, oh, if I have a 3-foot long piece and I want to split it. Well, we'll just say that you need to do this. Perhaps it's for crafting. Perhaps it's for making a trap. You can do this easily with an axe. You don't need a knife to be able to baton all the way down. It's called making wedges. And wedges are extremely important. They're even important if you have a knife. It saves your knife a lot of, you know, from a lot of brute force, pounding down on things. And let's also look at the fact that knives that are primarily good splitters, okay? And, you know, we'll talk about like the Ontario SP50, 51, things like that. The, you know, BK9, you know, or BK2, right? Usually knives that are better for splitting are not usually good at the other things. Now, one thing a knife does excel at, all right, that an axe cannot begin to touch it with is in green vegetation. And you'll notice this with indigenous people. So if there's something to notice, you'll notice that people generally, as you get closer to the boreal forest, right, as we get closer up north, you'll notice the woodsman, especially people who are living it, the axe comes into play. And then you'll notice people who are getting further down south, more in tropical zones, this becomes the issue, right? Green vegetation. Now the one thing about a knife for green vegetation, all right, say it's a machete, a parang, Golok. I may have misspelled that. It looks right to me. You know what I'm talking about. Excellent. Excellent tools. So to compare these, right, and we'll even throw, you know, the BK9 in there and the Ontarios, all right, and the tops, they got some big knives. We'll throw these in there, right? They're all big knives. To compare these to an axe, like I said, we might as well be saying vice grips versus screwdriver, right? Now, you can use these tools and you can, you know, push them beyond their limits, right? A machete could do you some good in a northern climate, right? I'd rather have it than nothing. And an axe would do you good in a tropical climate, right? I'd rather have it than nothing. There are still hardwoods in tropical climates, and there are still green and brushy vegetation in some of your northern climates. Look no further than indigenous people, than indigenous cultures. Look no further than what history says people used, right? Okay. Ethan Becker had raised a good point. He said, in your camp, you need a power slicer. One guy, one person, one woman, however you want to look at this, needs a power slicer. He said the BK5, the BK9, of course, you know, you don't have to just stick with K-bar to find that. He goes, everybody else can carry whatever they want. And I agree with him. It is very advantageous to have a person in the group with a larger knife, because a knife, you know, 8 inches or more does provide great ability, whether it is for a weekend or whether you are out there for 2 months or you're living in a remote cabin for, you know, 20 years. A large knife, you know, can be necessary. I wouldn't mind having one. You know, I tell you, I'd say a, you know, a boy's axe, maybe a BK9, and a a jackknife, you will get about anything you want to do with this. Of course, we could add a saw in there. It could be a folding saw, a pruning saw, bow saw, whatever you'd like. But you can literally do whatever you want with these. So is it really, do we really want to say things like knife versus axe? I would say no. And these debates are more, they're just for around, the campfire, a bunch of people jaw-jacking and talking about different things. And it is fun to entertain. I enjoy the conversation a lot. But when it really comes down to it, all right, and it's 5 degrees out, and the snow is coming down, and the wind is blowing, I know what tool I'm going to grab to guarantee I'm warm that night. I know what tool I would want to grab to fell trees. Not just one, but several for a night's fire and or shelter building in that scenario. I also know when I'm going through brushy swamps, I know what tool I'm going to grab. And it's going to be a tool that can gain speed and cut green vegetation and smaller vegetation. Well, use the proper tools, and I can't stress this enough, and I know I've talked about this and touched on this in some other videos. And I see these debates happen a lot. And people actually argue about them and get very, very emotional about these things. There really is no debate. An axe is king when it comes to building and firecraft, okay? And a large knife is king when it comes to slicing and cutting green vegetation and trail making in tropical situations. Pick the proper tool. That's all that you need to do to make your time in the woods much more enjoyable. If you bring the wrong tool, usually it's not the tool's fault. It's the user's fault. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.